Before we continue, let's get everything on the same layer. I think we can safely select everything here and press M and 1 and just move everything to the first layer. That just makes it a little bit easier to keep track of things, I think. So let's work on these holes here. And I think just like we've done before, we can use Booleans, but we're going to have to work on creating or increasing the amount of resolution on this piece. Because if we take the smooth shading off, if we just click flat, you can see we've got some faceting here on this piece. Now we can come over here to the subdivision surface modifier and increase the views, say from 2 up to, well, maybe up to 5. But what that does is it gives us a lot of polygons here. We're up to 1.3 million tries. And if your computer is having trouble dealing with that, that may be a problem. You can always take these individual pieces and move them out across multiple layers. I've just brought everything onto one layer just to keep it all organized. But if you're dealing with computer performance issues, you can always take pieces, say like this, and move it to layer 2, and this, and move it to layer 3, etc. And then each individual layer isn't as polygon intensive as all of them put together. So that's an option. Let me bring everything back here to layer 1. But the reason why I'm taking this up so high, the resolution so high, is so that the Booleans will have a clean cut. Now, as we've seen before, if I use the smooth shading, when I use Booleans, we're going to get some artifacting. And keep in mind as well that this is not the final object. Our final object is going to be the retopologized version. That's going to be a low polygon object that we can take into a game engine. So we're just using the high poly count to get a lot of detail that we're then going to bake into normal and ambient occlusion maps. All right, so let's go ahead and create a few cylinders. I'll press Shift A and create a cylinder here. I want it to be pretty clean, so I'm going to take this up to 60 sides, and I'll change the cap fill to triangle fan. And then I'll spin it around the Y. And let's go to that side view and try and put this in place. Now, since I have everything on one layer, I can just take this cylinder and press M and 2. And now it's over here on the second layer. So I'll scale it down and move it over here over one of these holes. Now I think for my purposes I'm going to have to probably have mine down a little bit like this, because if we go back to solid view and bring the other pieces back, you can see that this piece begins to intersect with this up here. So if I actually put it where it's supposed to be on the reference image, it's going to cut up into this curved part, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to bring this down just a bit like that. So as you can see in the side view, it's down a bit, and that's okay. We're just using the reference image as a guide. And now I'll spin back around, and let's duplicate these along here. Now we could also use the array modifier again, so let's go ahead and try that. I'll use the array modifier. We want it to move in the Y. I'll move that offset just a bit, and then I'll increase the count here like that. Now I'm going to need to apply the array modifier, but before I do that, let me just duplicate this and move this over and turn off or delete the array modifier here. Now what that'll do for me is give me an object to use for this hole here, and of course one to use for this one up here. And I'll scale this down just a bit like this. Now let's tumble back around, get this in place. I only want it to go in just a little bit like that. And then all of these here need to be combined together, so I'll apply the array modifier, select these two as well, and Control J to combine them all into one. Now let's mirror them over to the other side. I'll move the origin to the 3D cursor, which is currently in the center of the grid, and then I'll add a mirror modifier here. Now clearly this isn't going in the direction that we'd want it to, so let's go ahead and press Control A and apply the rotation and scale. And there they are over there. Now let's go ahead and hit apply. And that's all one object now. We can rename that object. Let's call it, just like we have before, a cutter. And then let's take this piece and apply our subdivision surface modifier here. Let's then add a new modifier, a Boolean, and we'll choose that a cutter for our cutting object, and we'll change our operation to difference. And there we go. So now, if we take these pieces and turn off that layer number 2, there we go. We can see our holes cut into that object. Now, if we want to see them a little bit better, at least temporarily, what we can do is press the N key, and over here under shading, we can turn on ambient occlusion. And what that does is it just simulates ambient occlusion here in the viewport. It may slow down the viewport just a little bit, but for a temporary thing, just to see how we're doing, it's kind of cool. So there you can see those holes a little better. Now, the next thing we should do is add this piece right here. I'll turn off my ambient occlusion. There we go. So I'm going to go over to a new layer, maybe layer 3, and I'll click and put the cursor right in here. And let's create a new cylinder. Now for this we don't need 60 vertices. I'll go ahead and take this down to 12, let's say. And we still have a triangle fan, that's good. I'll go ahead and rotate it around the Y and scale it down. It looks to me like this tube here may be a little bit smaller than this, so I'll scale it down just a bit and bring it up a hair. And then let's go ahead and cut this in half and mirror it, so we only have to worry about the modeling on one side. So I'll insert an edge loop here, and I'll just press the Enter key twice to ensure that that's right down the center. I'll then select these faces and these faces and delete those. Now let's go ahead and mirror it over. And of course we need to press Control A and apply the rotation and scale. And there it is there. If I tab into edit mode, we can only see the polygons on one side, so I'll turn on the edit cage with this button right here. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and grab these and pull them out a bit so they're outside of the edge of that base object. Now I'd like to see both an orthographic view and a perspective view as I model this. So what I think I'll do is just press Control-Alt-Q, and that will bring up the quad view. And you can see here that we've got a side view right here. We've got a top view and a front view. Really all I'm going to be looking at is the right and the perspective views. So let's give this a try. I'm going to hit the Z key to go to wireframe, and I'll hit extrude, and I'll scale out like this, about like so. And then I'll extrude out again, pull out like that. And what I'm working on is this piece right here. So then I'll extrude and scale in a bit, like this. Pull out like that. Then I'll extrude and scale in again like this. And now maybe I'll just extrude and push straight back like this. I'm not going to worry about having it go all the way through because we aren't going to see that in the normal map anyway. So there we go. I'll press Ctrl-Alt-Q again, and now I'll hit the division key on the numpad and isolate this piece. Now let's tab into edit mode and let's add some edges to hold it when we subdivide it. So to do that, I'll go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier. I'll click this button right here so we can see the edit cage applied after the modifier. There we go. I'll also tab into object mode and click smooth. Now I'll go ahead and insert some edge loops to hold these. And maybe I'll also select these faces in here and just hit extrude and then scale in just a bit here too to tighten that up a bit. If we turn on our ambient occlusion again, we can kind of get a sense of what it's going to look like.